a little bit about myself is I am a parent who's passionately involved in advancing the rights of people with disabilities. Um, I've dedicated the past 25 years to advocacy and applying my personal and professional knowledge in helping others, whether that be individuals with disabilities or family members. Even in the professional community, I've done some contract work. Over the years, I've worked and volunteered for various organizations that are set up to empower individuals with disabilities and their families to be the decision makers in their lives. I think that that is very important. We need the guidance and support of professionals, but the bottom line is we're here from birth to death, whenever that is. I currently serve as the volunteer assistant for the Self-Determination Group, and I'm a contract presenter for the Texas Parent to Parent Pathways to Adulthood workshop series. So self-determination is part of that Pathways to Adulthood, so it works right in hand. So today, my goal, I think, for the presentation is to really explain what is the concept of self-determination. My daughter, Carissa, and I were going to present together, but she's not feeling the best this morning, and so it will be me. The only thing is I do not like to present without the voice of people with disabilities. So at the end, we'll show a short video. It is members of the self-determination group, and they're talking about why self-determination is important to them, how it makes them feel, and what happens and how they feel if it's not acknowledged. So who is the self-determination group? The self-determination group is a self-advocacy group that's run by and for individuals with disabilities who are 14 or older. We serve to educate, advocate for, and support the concept of self-determination. We know that self-determination is a natural part of life, but unfortunately for individuals with disabilities, sometimes that's been removed from them. And then we have to question, why do we see some of the behaviors? And when I say behaviors, it could be depression, it could be, truly what we think of when we think of, disruptive behaviors, what have you. So we also take actions to promote the human rights and inclusion of people with disabilities. And that means we are very, very much involved in policy development and watch that type of stuff. So what we know about disability is that disability is a natural part of the human experience that in no way diminishes the rights of people with disabilities to experience and participate in and contribute to society. Unfortunately, again, we sometimes know that people are not involved. They're not involved in making their own choices or, pursuing inclusion in society. Sometimes people with disabilities are relegated to separate, segregated settings, and this is not what was intended. These two quotes that are on this slide are from the Developmental Disabilities Act and also from IDEA. So when you look at disability as a natural part of the human experience, we have to say, what happens? Why is it that people with disabilities aren't included? And so, we have to look at who is doing the excluding and why is the excluding occurring? And is there a way to keep people involved that we can keep them in the mainstream of community and society? So part of that is that we do not give people an opportunity to live a self-determined life. And when you think about what self-determination is, it's being in charge of your own life. It's making decisions about your life. And so this morning, think about your morning. If you are getting up and getting ready, did you decide to use an alarm? Did you decide to eat breakfast? Are you one of those people who have to have their coffee before they can move? I'm not a coffee drinker, but everybody else in my family is, and it's not pretty if they haven't had their coffee, but it's making decisions about your life. And then now imagine that if you're a coffee drinker and I'm not, and I say to you, well, we're not having coffee, we're going to have tea. I like peach mango tea in the morning. And somebody, how does that make you feel? That somebody has now taken something so important to you away from you, right? It's also being responsible for the decisions you make, It's deciding who helps you. I had a friend who was a paraplegic and had always asked for female support. And so curiosity got the best of me. And I said, why a female instead of a male? And he said, males hurt me. They're not gentle. Females are gentle. Right. And so imagine that you don't get an opportunity to say who supports you and how do they support you. It's about knowing how to spend your money. And oftentimes we hear that people with disabilities do not understand money concepts, right? But when you look at self-determination, one of the characteristics is support. So self-determination is not doing everything by yourself. It is knowing who can help you and who to ask for help. And that in itself is self-determination. So when you look at what does self-determination mean to you, Jamie Butler is one of the co-founders, along with my daughter, with the self-determination group. And he says it's his freedom. Imagine that, just having freedom to be. And Carissa said it was living her own life. She didn't want somebody else to control her life. So we know that there are 5 principles of self-determination. And so I'm going to go into that briefly and talk about that. And if you have questions, please jump in the chat as was discussed earlier, because I want to make sure that I'm answering questions if needed. But the 5 principles of self-determination are freedom, authority, support, responsibility, and confirmation. And what we have done as a self-determination group is we have created a curriculum on what self-determination is. And one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that it had some universal design for learning within it. And so as you see, yellow represents freedom. We went through colors, we went through symbolism. So all of these colors and symbols have meaning beyond just, looking pretty on a screen. So the other thing we did is how do we, everything in the disability world has an acronym, right? And so we were trying to figure out an acronym for our principles and as a way to help learn it. And so we came up with SCARF. So that would be SCARF. And we know that a scarf, keeps us warm from the elements, right? It protects us from the elements, what have you. And we really thought that that was a good acronym. And the fact that, the more freedom and authority and responsibility you have, the better your life is. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. So, one of the things when we put this presentation together, some of these visuals you'll see, they helped us pick them out. This presentation was created in collaboration between myself and the group. And so, it's basically they wanted you to know that, they want the freedom to plan their own life. They want to choose who helps them with that planning, right? My daughter, my oldest daughter, she said, Mom, why do you help Carissa with her money? And I said, well, that's because that's who she chose to help her. And she said, well, why don't you just let her do it by yourself? And I said, well, one, she wants to have help because that's where she needs help in budgeting. I said, but secondly, how many people do you want me to help you, or do you want to go to the bank and have somebody help you, right? And so anyway, it's a concept that we, for whatever reason, people with disabilities who need supports, we see those supports as so great that they have to receive them in a separate setting. And the truth is that they're just not normalized, right? And we have to recognize that supports, everybody needs supports and they're different. And we can't just say, if the majority of people receive these, then you can belong. And if not, you have to be excluded. So, people with disabilities want to determine where they live, work, and spend their free time, who they spend it with, who helps them, who they have a relationship with, right? I had a mom contact me about guardianship not long ago, and her reason, I said, why do you feel you need guardianship? You have to, really look at these alternatives. The court's going to ask, have you considered them, and why would they not be helpful? And she said, well, I want to determine who he marries. I don't like his girlfriend. And I'm like, well, how many of us have not liked our children's choice of spouse, right? And so who are we to make that decision? And is that a reason to strip a person of their basic human rights? So, we don't have the right to make these decisions for people. And that's the bottom line. And, they want to be able to take risk, right? And, it's so funny because Helen Keller has a quote. It's, security is mostly a superstition. It doesn't exist in nature, nor do children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. And when we deny a person the right to take risk, we silence their voices, we limit their opportunities, and quite honestly, we don't allow for personal growth, right? And when we do this presentation, usually one of the group members will say, how many of you have made a mistake? How many of you took risk you didn't know what the outcome would be? And what did you learn from that? And often it's our greatest lessons, right? So anyway, but these are the things they want to do. It's their life. The decisions we all make in life, they want to make them as well. And Christopher Morley has a quote that we absolutely love, which is, there is only one success: to be able to spend your life in your own way. And I think that is profound, and it's something that we all take for granted. But yet people with disabilities, we try to control them in the name of safety, which safety in the long run isn't what's occurring. The other characteristic my goodness, I am just principle. Sorry about that. Is the authority to make their own decisions, to decide how to spend money given to them. I often talk with people who have no idea how much money is theirs, where their money comes from. They don't know if they receive Medicaid or Social Security, or if they have a waiver program, or if they're on a waiting list. And this, that has to stop, in my opinion, because if we don't know these things intrinsically as a person, even if it is with support, then we don't know what is happening around us. And we are at the greatest risk. If Medicaid went away, if Social Security went away, right? We are at the greatest risk of change in our life, significant change, right? They have the authority to be the employer. Imagine that. That's a whole new role, right? Who they hire, what services they're provided, when services are provided, where and how often. I was just at the doctor 2 days ago, and I have diabetes, and she says, so what do you think about insulin? And I said, I think I probably wouldn't take it because I'm terrified of needles. And so she said, okay, let's talk about other meds. Great, I'm good with that. So, if we get to make those decisions, why don't people with disabilities get to? And so often they're not asked. And Tom McNerney, my friend, he wants a woman to help him because she's gentle, right? So we also should be able to evaluate and control the quality of services, if it's good or bad. And what one considers good is one's idea of what good is, right? And so I think that that's very, very important. I was sitting at a breakfast with my friend Laura. Her son is Jamie, who co-founded the group, and he texts her and said, hey mom, I fired he calls his attendant his assistant, I fired my assistant. And she said, you're going to? And he says, no, I did. Right? And so she said, can I ask why? Yes, he's not keeping me safe. Perfect. So anyway, but they get to decide who's good and who's bad. And in the long run, the decision that Jamie made was really good, because what happened to him and why he fired him is that the assistant was, they were driving and he was pulled over for expired tags, and he had an outstanding warrant because he hadn't paid a ticket. It wasn't major, but he had an outstanding warrant. And so Jamie's on the side of the road, right? And had to call for help. The police helped him call for help. But he didn't call his mother. We were at breakfast. But anyway, people get to decide that what is good and what is bad. And so often we want to be that decision maker. And yes, we can help them make that decision. The way Carissa and I have things set up, and this is her choice, is I go through a list of people who have expressed interest. I interview them, and then I call down that list and with her and say, okay, here's what these people have said. She'll pick who she wants to interview, and then she'll interview and make a decision. Now, mind you, that does not come without a lot of support, right? But that's okay. We all need support. So, independence and interdependence. I think that so often, especially, I think back on Carissa's IEP goals and objectives, that she would independently do blah, 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 right? And for a person who needs a lot of support, I really think we kind of set her up for some failure, because many of those things, as I look back, she was never going to do independently. But I think that we must recognize that no one, not even you or I, do everything by ourselves. And sometimes when we're in an open forum and presenting face to face, I'll say, "Who here is independent?" And everybody raises their hand, and unless they've been to a session we've done, and then they're like, "Nope." And the truth is, we're not. I have a hairdresser. I have someone who cleans my home just because I don't want to clean it. That's just the truth. I can do more stuff like this if I'm not cleaning my house. So, we go to the bank to make decisions sometimes about investments or our money, right? But yet we say that people with disabilities can't manage their money, so we don't give them the authority over it. So they, they may need the support to make decisions and plan their own life, to reach goals, to find people to know and trust, to plan resources that are meaningful, and to be a member of the community. And, one of the things that really happened in 2015 is the guardianship reform happened in 2015, and the courts were charged with determining that alternatives to guardianship were no longer going to be helpful for a person, that they were a last and best decision for the person. And so, when you look at that, supported decision-making came along, and that was a phenomenal tool where the person with a disability determines who can support them, and you sign a document, and there's, some guidance about what support looks like and what it doesn't look like. But for the first time, Texas became the leader in the supported decision-making theory. We were the first state who authorized supported decision making, and so it's not only important to us, but we see the value in the disability rights movement in giving people a greater voice. And so that came along, and then the state has made progress towards decision making of people with disabilities. And while self-determination is something that is a soapbox for me, and I could get on it and speak, at the highest mountain, the largest stadium, pack the room, right? Because it's vital to living a good, meaningful quality of life. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act supports my thoughts, which is, I always love that when I can pull a quote that supports my vision. But its independence is not measured by the number of tasks we can do without assistance, but with the quality of life we can lead with assistance. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about self-determination, right? Is we need assistance to live a good quality of life. Now, many people have said, well, we have to have responsibility. Well, yes, we do, right? Everybody has to be responsible. And so, one of the things is not only just responsibility with our resources and being smart with our money, but it's setting goals for our life, right? And I will tell you that, I've had families ask me, well, what do you do if your child does not use words to communicate? Well, we have to listen with all our senses, right? Well, my child doesn't communicate. Do you know what makes your child happy? Do you know when they're hungry? Do you know? Yes, yes. Well, then they're communicating, right? Are they using an augmentative communication device? There's still communication. I have some people who have a yes no system with an eye blink, once for yes, two for no. I mean, there is ways to help people without guiding them to where you want them to be. And I think it's vital that we pay attention and listen with all our senses. And, for me, my daughter does use words for communication, but language is also a big, big issue. And so, sometimes she'll use sign language. Sometimes if I watch her face, she'll answer something and I can tell, and I'll just ask, is that really what you want? And she'll either say yes or no. So even if they use words, we have to pay attention to other things. One of the things people with disabilities have gotten really, really good at, which is really, really bad, is telling us what they think we want to hear. And while that's okay, it's not in the fact that that's not going to help them get to the place they want to be. And in fact, we can do all of this planning and create a life that is not really what they want, because we're only getting information which what they think we want to hear. So we have a responsibility to give back to others and our community through our presence, efforts, and gifts. And that is really important to people with disabilities. With COVID and my daughter lost her job, they closed the office she worked at. And so, she's like, Mom, I want to go back to work, and we've talked about it and we're working on it. But the truth is, because she's not had her own income coming in, my husband and I have just automatically started paying for things we typically wouldn't pay for. And the other day, just recently, she told me, I'm tired of you paying for my dinner. I can handle that. And so, she wants to take care of her own. She wants to go back to volunteering, because even when she had a job, she volunteered. And so, unfortunately, places where she volunteered aren't having volunteers right now because of COVID, right? COVID has really hindered life for a lot of people, but even more so for people with disabilities. So, and of course, being responsible with your money. One of the things that people who get Medicaid or Social Security or even a Medicaid waiver program is there's responsibilities that come with those benefits, right? And with a Medicaid waiver program, those are funds through community-based supports, home and community-based supports. And that goal is that those funds will help a person live a good quality of life in the community. And what happened is, a few years ago, the government realized that these funds were supporting supports that looked more like institutional supports. And so they came out with the rule setting, which said if it looks like, sounds like, acts like an institution, then we cannot use home and community-based support services funded through the government for those programs. And so we are going to see some changes to how we handle day programs and community-based services that's supposed to come out in 23. And so, we're just watching the process. It has been expanded over time, the implementation date, but we think that in 2023 it will be the time. So anyway, and then confirmation, and this is huge. This is huge, and that is that people with disabilities should serve a vital role in creating a new and better system, whether that's a school system, whether that's a community-based system, if it's a provider agency, whatever it is, they should be guiding us. It is not our life. We cannot, as much as we can experience, life with them as a professional or as a parent, we can't experience it as they do. And, I have a friend, his name is David, and he requires some medical support. And over the years, he's learned how to do it himself, which would be very nice. if he was allowed, but Medicaid rules say that it has to be done by a nurse. Well, think of the money we could save if David was allowed to do his own um, procedures, right? And so, he constantly advocates for stop having us pay for things. You want to talk about Medicaid reform and you want to talk about fraud, but let's talk about waste, And when we have to buy durable medical equipment from a DME provider, and the cost of that through the provider is more than the cost at Walmart or Target or Home Goods, right? And so, if we want to create effective and useful systems, we have to listen to people with disabilities, and we have to support them in how to serve in those roles, right? So I think that when we look at confirmation, it's as equally important as any other part. But the problem is, if we're not doing those other parts, confirmation is going to be hard. Okay. So we need to consider all of that. And we know that, allowing somebody to live a life that they want to live, to take reasonable and calculated risks, is somewhat scary, right? There are times when Carissa says, yeah, it's my life. And I have to think about it. And I'm like, okay, you're right. It's your life. And I compare, luckily I have an older daughter she's 6 years older than Carissa. And I think, well, how did I feel when Krista did this? How do I feel about, my role as a parent? Even in, Krista's 37, Carissa's 32, but still, you're always our children, but our roles change, right? They have to. And so I have something to compare it to, and kind of self-monitor myself, especially when Chris is like, it's my life. I'm like, oh, okay, let me think. So anyway, then we know that a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. Confidence, dreams, excitement, the confidence to explore new things, opportunities, right? The purpose of our life, and then self-discovery. It is hard to know what you like or don't like if we're not letting you take risks. So we cannot protect people so that their life is not worth living. There's a quote that says, life is not measured by the amount of breaths we take, but the moments that take our breath away. And that is true. That is true. Imagine living a life that you didn't want to live for 100 years versus a life that gave you fulfillment and excitement and a reason to get up in the morning, right? And you only live 50. Did you live a good life? Yeah, you did. You lived the life you wanted. Now, we're not saying, don't put people in harm's way, in ways that, would make no good sense. It's looking at how do we fulfill their needs and do it in a way that brings them joy and a reason to get up in the morning. So why self-determination? Well, here's some research that's it's a little old, but I think it's profoundly purposeful as to know why. If we're not going to listen to people with disabilities, can we listen to the researchers, right? And I've had the gift in my life to spend a lot of time with adults with disabilities, and even teens with disabilities. But what was funny is, while everybody was saying what people can't, wouldn't, shouldn't, couldn't do, they were showing me how it was getting done. And the beauty of their creativity to get that done in an environment that didn't support self-determination, right? I have a friend, her name is Beverly, and Beverly used to live in the Denton State Supported Living Center. Beverly's now married in her own home. She's been married for over 42 years. She's the president of our self-determination group, and she is amazing. So I'll tell a story after I read these two quotes here from research, but it says people with disabilities with higher levels of self-determination are healthier. They're more likely to be employed, earn more per hour, and experience more independence, right? How many times have we heard families say, I'm just so tired. I wish they could do stuff by themselves. Well, a lot of times they can. And a lot of times we're the holdback. And we have to give that some thought and discussion. And we also have to look at, what does that independence look like, right? How does that look? And then when denied self-determination, individuals with disabilities are more likely to feel helpless, hopeless, passive, and are at greater risk of abuse. Think about that for a minute. I don't think any of us really want to put someone at greater risk of abuse, right? And so the important thing about my friend Beverly is, when she lived in the Denton State Center, which was it was called the Denton State School, so it's been several years ago, and it was at the time when, well, families are still told this today, but not as frequently, that, your child's disabled, just place them in the institution. You're young, you can have more children, right? And when Beverly was a teenager, the family put her at the Denton State Center, thinking that it was the best thing. And Beverly hated it. She absolutely hated it. One of the things she wanted to do was to take a shower by herself. They had communal showers, and she hated it. She wanted her privacy. Imagine for a moment you didn't have that opportunity to decide. So Beverly got up one morning, like at 3, 4 in the morning, to take her shower, and she got caught, and she got in trouble. And she didn't like, I mean, imagine that, you get in trouble. And she didn't like the way that was handled. And next to the state center was a farm, and had lots of horses. And Beverly's dad had a farm, and Beverly had a farm. And so she was raised with these horses. So what did she do? When nobody was paying attention, she eloped, took a horse, and rode it home. And instead of going into the house, she went into their barn. And then the ranch hand went in and got her dad and said, did we get a new horse? And he's like, no. He's like, there's a horse in the barn. And so at the same time that this gentleman was telling Beverly's father what was happening, they get a call from the Denton Center. And so he goes out and he says, Beverly, are you in here? Yes. Anyway, the sad story is Beverly was reprimanded for trying to express to her, to others, that she was not happy. Had to go back to the center, had to work for the gentleman in cleaning the stalls. And so, but the bottom line is she did get out, right? And when she got out, she had her freedom, and she lives that life today. And when you spend time with Beverly and you listen to her, talk about what happened when she was there, and how she felt like she had no control, and how she took it back, right? It's very, very powerful, very, very powerful. And so what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is to show you their video. The self-determination group was approached by a professional film developer, and they asked us if we would be interested in creating a video on what self-determination meant to them, and the group was thrilled. And so it's a short video. I'm going to say a few things after the video, and then open it up for a little discussion, questions you may have, and what I can answer. After the video, I just do want to share, just a quick story, but the video is important to show that. So let me pull the video up. Young adults, older adults. We have to expose them to things that we're going to ask them later. What choices do you want, right? Help them understand that when it's cold outside and what cold looks like. My daughter's a visual learner, right? And so what about a thermometer, a visual large thermometer that's designed, to be a support mechanism for a person who doesn't really have the concept of hot or cold, but yet understands that blue is cold and red is hot, right? And if the temperature is in between here, then you kind of know. And then here's a visual of types of clothes you might wear if it's cold, or clothes you would wear if it's hot. and what clothes do our children want to wear? What type of shoes, right? And you know, I can't remember who said this, but we can't fix things in the same thinking that we created them, right? And so, if we say someone has to tie their shoes, even though we have Velcro, if they're never going to tie their shoes, is that the expectation? Is the expectation to tie your shoes or to put your shoes on by yourself? I think that we really have to reevaluate how we support people and what's important to them, right?